Incredible ocean, magical place to be. So much that we can learn from life in the deep blue sea. Incredible ocean, magical place to be. So much that we can learn from life in the deep blue sea. Life in the deep blue sea. So much that we can learn from life in the deep blue sea.
Hello.
Hey.
Way. Hello. I think this is all working. Hey.
Great.
It's World Jellyfish Day.
How exciting!
Oh, happy World Jellyfish Day.
Happy Wibbly Wobbly Day.
Happy Wibbly Wobbly Day.
Yes.
Great. Well, thanks for having us for a start. We're INSTAR.
No worries.
We're really chuffed to be here today to share some of our exciting ideas and to learn more about your work too, and of course loads about jellyfish.
Yeah. Well, I've been nerding out about jellyfish all day, so I've been trying to I feel like I should come with a caveat that I'm not even any part of a jellyfish expert in any way, shape or form, but they're quite cool, and I enjoy chatting about them. So yeah, let's do this.
Yeah, well, we're enthusiasts and we love them, but yeah, likewise, we're here to learn. So if anyone's out there listening and they've got any questions or any corrections even, just post it in the thread, because actually that'll help us. So yeah, that's great. So it'd be really great to let you know why we're here, really, why INSTAR and Incredible Oceans have come together, because it's quite an interesting sort of collaboration, or at least an introduction to each other's work. So we thought we'd just share a little bit about who we are first, if that's all right. So we are INSTAR, it's myself, Trish and Nick. We are artists, but also naturalists, not scientists, just to be clear. But we're really inspired by the natural world with all of our creative works. We do loads of public sculptures and various sort of projects that link and connect people to nature. And we submitted an application to create a sculpture, a kinetic sculpture of a jellyfish for the Festival of Science and Curiosity in Nottingham. And we've been successful with that submission. But as part of that process, we started researching loads about jellyfish, and we came across you, Russell, and the Incredible Oceans through, I think it's the Connect Festival that's happening later this month?
Communicate Festival.
Yeah. So that's how we found you and found out more about what you do. And so we dropped you a line, and you got back to us straight away. When hey, it's World Jellyfish Day, let's do something. This is great. So this is how this has happened. So so that's us really in a very brief sort of summary. We'll talk a bit about our art as we go along. But what about yourself, Russell? Tell us a bit about Incredible Oceans.
Well, I guess I was really excited when you guys emailed us, because it's really it's quite rare to find organizations that do science and art in a good way. Normally what you have is either people who are really hot on the science, and they've got their academic credentials and they've got all the facts at their disposal that they can hit people with, but I guess it's recognizing that not everyone reacts to that, and not everyone, you can't bombard people with facts and get them into something. It works with some people, it kind of works with me to a certain degree, but understanding how other brains work and how other people tick is a really important part of what Incredible Oceans does. So as well as working with scientists, we also really enjoy working with artists and creatives and conservationists and local community groups and all these other people to try and just get the ocean message out to as many people as possible. So obviously you guys came forward and were like, yeah, we're doing this kinetic sculpture of a jellyfish. So I was like instantly like, oh, that sounds awesome. And then and reaching out and having this, we've been having emails backwards and forwards, and clearly you guys have a really good awareness of how to make impactful art that relates back to the environment, but also have a good grounding of the science as well. So I was like, yeah, totally have to do something with you. So that was cool.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we're quite tuned in on the same sort of ethos, really. That we're similarly sort of like, we've worked in the conservation sector where it is can be quite statistical and quite sort of theatrical in many respects, or it's sort of niche in terms of style and approaches to engagement. And we are true believers in the opportunities that arts and science collaboratively can achieve, and getting people tuned in to new ways and perspectives of nature, and also helping with that behavioural change to make it that more accessible and more reachable, really. So that's great. So yeah, here we are talking about jellyfish today. And I thought what would be a really great starting point for us is to just share a story of our first connection or memory of jellyfish. So Nick, I'm going to start with you on this one. What's your sort of first memory of a jellyfish?
Well, it's interesting, everyone with jellyfish, don't they? They start off, it's on most floors of infant schools, or it's one of the first things you learn to draw as a child, with the bell shape of the tentacles coming off. It's normally pink, there's normally blue. But you very rarely see them, but you sort of know that they're around. And I remember I think it must have been in Cornwall, because I spent so much time in Cornwall as a child. I remember getting stung around about my shin. I didn't know what it was, but I got stung. Big red patch on my leg. And after that, for years and years after that, I only went into the ocean again with shoes on, which doesn't make any sense. But I was told it was a jellyfish thing, so it was invisible to me, but that was my first jellyfish experience. What about you?
That's great. I mean, I think when it comes to sort of stings, we'll go on to that, because it's interesting, isn't it, that relationship we have with jellyfish when we're children, or even just visually in art. They're so beautiful, but when we start talking about stings and this other sort of element, this about when they're in the ocean, this is my story really, is that it changes our sort of feeling slightly. So my memory is going off the sort of south coast of Wales on a boat trip to an island, and I think I must have been pretty young, and it was sort of like an organised tourist kind of boat trip, and on that, looking over the sort of side of the boat, there were loads and loads of jellyfish. I mean, I think they could have been barrel jellyfish, I don't know, but it was one of those really distinctive memories. And I remember there was a sort of feeling of like, wow, and then a bit of a like, ooh, this sort of like sudden fear that, there's jellyfish in the ocean, and it's just really interesting, but it's a really distinctive memory for me. So yeah, these things that sort of held with me, really. I don't think I've seen so many jellyfish since. What about you, Russell? What's your sort of memory of, or first memory of?
Oh, well, I guess, I was really lucky in as much that I grew up in Dubai in the 1980s, and so had a slightly different, I guess, engagement with the sea in that regards. But we used to get, these like little blobby, almost like balls of goo that would just wash up on the beach. And we also used to get these big kind of bright blue bell-shaped ones with these big kind of like cauliflower like tentacles hanging off the bottom, and they were really cool to like snorkel up to and watch the bells pulsate. But you very quickly learned that as well as just having those cauliflower bits, but there were lots and lots of invisible kind of tendrils hanging off of them. And I do remember kind of getting stung on the face by one, and just like, I was just trying to look at you, why did you do that? But I also have this really distinctive memory, and this is gonna really paint me in a bad light, but there was a big storm and loads of these jellyfish washed up on the beach, and there was so many of these jellyfish. And when jellyfish wash up on the beach, unfortunately they die, that's it. And I remember basically all the kids in my village just ran down to the sea, and we had like a giant jellyfish fight where, like, honestly, and people were just pelting each other with these, and they kind of stung a little bit. And I remember vividly like bending over to pick one up, and my mate coming up behind me and just like throwing one down the back of my shorts.
I didn't think for a moment that when we had this talk that we'd get a story like that.
What species they were?
I wish I'd known. Like, I feel like now, as some kind of semblance of a marine biologist, I should probably go back and like at least research that slightly. It's literally, I was trying to be all like, I discovered this jellyfish and it was just so graceful. And actually, it's like this really meathead, like, we had a jellyfish fight, kind of as our first interaction with them. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say you know, I mean, they're just there and they're quite cool, but you obviously don't want to get. I guess I have a similar interaction. They're like, I guess, like a pretty stinging nettle is how I would kind of like. You know, you don't want to. You appreciate what they look like, but you don't want to kind of interact with them more than you have to. I guess would be my.
Well, do you ever have that moment? I've had it a few times down in Cornwall, say snorkeling, and you come out and you think, there must be a jellyfish in there because I can feel I've been stung somewhere, but I didn't see one. And quite often it's that nettle, like tingly, numb feeling, and you know something's got you.
Well, I guess so researching today, and obviously a lot of people on Twitter, I did like a thread in the build up to this, just with some cool jellyfish facts that I was discovering. And I wanted to find out like what kind of, in terms of stings, what the worst jellyfish was. And and there's a thing called the Schmidt pain scale, where this guy just basically stung himself with, I think, like 80 different types of insects and ranked them all from like 0 to 4. And the box jellyfish, which you get around Australia, is ranked as a 4. And I'm not going to show any pictures of it, but if you want to Google box jellyfish sting, it is unbelievable. It looks like someone has been whipped with like a hot wire or something like that. It's so again, I feel really lucky that we don't live in Australia.
We'll come on to things later on as well, actually. But yeah, that thing of sort of like, you know, the fear of that sting is pretty significant for a lot of people, isn't it? But actually, the reality is in our waters, it's just not as bad. But yeah, those pictures are actually quite entertaining at the same time, and we do have a curiosity to sort of seek them out, don't we? And go, how bad can they get? But yeah, we'll certainly look at that one. Okay, so let's start off with what we're going to do with just some themes really about jellyfish as we go through our chat, which we think would just be really nice to cover some bits and bobs. So if you've got any questions, we'll check our comments and see if we can share those throughout the event. But also at the end, if anyone's got any questions, we can go to those too. So we thought we'd just find out really just about how long jellyfish have been around. Now, there is a sort of fossil that was discovered in the then Utah Sea, which is now Utah Desert, which is 500 million years old. And what's firstly really interesting about the fact that there's a fossil of a jellyfish is the fact that jellyfish are a jelly, and they're pretty rare. Now, I've got a picture one, I'm going to put one up now, but should we talk about why 500 million years ago finding a jellyfish that looks like a jellyfish is quite unusual?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just blown away by the fact that it's fossilized. Like to find a jellyfish. I mean, at school you're always taught that only the hard parts of an animal fossilize, and so this is pretty incredible. The fact that we've been able to kind of do that. So yeah, I don't know. Well, I say we've been able to. The Earth has been able to do that.
Well, yeah, jellies being around 98% water. I mean, when they die, they mainly dissolve, and this would mean this fell into some very soft sediment and got covered with some very soft, probably volcanic. You know, it would have to fall on something soft and be covered in something very soft. So, but then to find it, I mean, that's quite incredible to find it that pristine. And
it is that sort of idea that when 500 million years ago, if you are swimming in the sea, you will see in very, very, very different animals and creatures. Something we wouldn't recognise them all, apart from one, which would be the jellyfish. Now that means it's not really evolved massively, and that's just quite an interesting discussion really to have, isn't it? Now we were in Northumberland early this year on the beaches up there, and we came across these really cool gooseberries. I'm going to put a picture up now on
sea gooseberries
on the beach, and these are sort of like original. You can describe this, Nick. What is the sort of relation between a jellyfish and a sea gooseberry, and how are these relating to the sort of evolution of these creatures?
Well, Russell's probably better at describing the relationship, but I mean they are very closely related. Sea gooseberries are ctenophores, which means that the main thing that really makes them different from jellyfish is they don't sting. They have tiny cilia, which are hairs that run down them, and they use those to get around in the ocean. But they're very closely connected, and it's thought that they were just before, well, quite a long way in the scheme of things before jellyfish, and we can probably trace them all the way back to ourselves.
So are we saying then that us as humans, originate from jellyfish?
Yes.
Is that definite?
No.
well, 500 million years ago, there was nothing that had any semblance of a human. So, I mean, 500 million years ago, I wish I knew my geological eras better, but there would have been, I mean, ultimately, we all came out of the sea, so we would have shared a common ancestor back, at some point. So, I imagine there is a good chunk of jelly DNA that we share with them. You know, there's that stuff like we share 20% of our genes with a banana, for example. And the fact that they are, multicellular organisms and their cells require stuff means that actually the building blocks of that DNA.
Well, you can hear it, Russell, but we're breaking up.
Oh, you froze slightly, but you're back now. I don't.
Yeah, thank you. You went a bit slurry. I hope that wasn't too difficult. Sorry, but yeah, we didn't hear what you said, but others did, so that's all right.
Okay, I was just quickly saying that there's that whole thing of like we share 20% of our DNA with a banana. We share like 50% of our DNA with houseflies. Yeah. So the kind of building blocks of like a multicellular life form, we actually, how a cell works, having to have like a nucleus and, cytoplasm and a cell membrane and all that. Having those building blocks encoded in the DNA is kind of a big chunk. So the fact that we are part of the animal kingdom with them shows that, we would have shared a common ancestor like millions, hundreds of millions of years ago. So
yeah, it's pretty incredible stuff, really. And also, like looking at this image here in the Tree of Life, it's sort of like when you see right at the bottom there, we have got the jellyfish and sea gooseberries.
You can just sit down there on the
right,
map,
if you can zoom in. But humans are right at the top. It's just really interesting to see actually the significance of jellyfish. We think about them now, but actually they're there in their original form that long ago, and that is just really quite powerful stuff.
Sophia has just commented that it was the Ordovician, which was 500 to 425 million years ago. There we go. Thank you, Sophia.
I think it's also called a Cretaceous because they were so well developed when the fossils were found that they either evolved incredibly quickly or they must have been around a hell of a lot longer than that. So way beyond 500 million years, I would have thought.
I mean, when we sort of think about sort of, the anatomy of jellyfish and actually their sort of, where they've originated from and how simple a form they are in many respects, although of course they're not that simple, they're pretty impressive. But actually when you think about jellyfish and what they're made up of, it's kind of, I can't get my head around it really. In fact, they've got no brain, they've got no blood, no lungs. I mean, what do jellyfish actually have? I mean, obviously there's about 98% jelly and water, yeah? So what else is there and how do they function as jellyfish? I'm looking at you, Nick.
Yeah.
Well, we've got this we could have a look at. I mean, the main part of the jelly is a substance called mesoglea. They've got an outer skin and epidermis. But yeah, 98% water. The mesoglea is a substance that can hold a lot of oxygen. There's obviously the tentacles in the middle. We have the oral arms, which are basically lip extensions. To put it any other way, Russell, have you got any other anatomy you'd like to add to that?
No, I'll be honest. I was aware that there was the mouth kind of up underneath in the middle. You've obviously got that big kind of umbrella structure that pulsates and moves them along, and you've got the tentacles hanging down. And I was aware that like quite often, like in moon jellyfish, and you can see them in the background with you guys at the moment, those kind of little rings are their gonads, their sex organs. So
yeah, and they have this sort of like they sort of poo and poop in the same sort of area of their mouth.
Yeah.
But I think it's also something I've learned through the research of this project is the oral arms and the tentacles are two very different things. And some jellyfish don't have tentacles. I mean, that's something I didn't know. So it's sort of like the way that it sort of feeds itself. I mean, if it's got no brain, or anything like that, how does it find food? How does it know how to get food? Have you got any thoughts on that, Russell, about how, you're researching plankton, but how do animals actually find nutrients and food in the water if they don't have brains and things like that?
Well, from what I gather, a lot of jellyfish are basically opportunistic hunters. So they, if you like, their tentacles that they pay out. And I'm not sure whether scientifically we're supposed to call them tentacles or tendrils, because I always thought like a tentacle was something with suckers on the end of it. Whereas I was like, but then I'm like, is a tendril, is that like a botany thing? So yeah, but yeah, we're getting pedantic. We're getting pedantic there. So yeah, I was always so I guess they're a bit like a fisherman, or fisher person, I should say, in the regard that they just cast this big kind of stinging net that flows behind them, and anything that kind of wanders into it ends up being stung and killed, and the tentacles, tendrils, whatever, gradually work their way up, and they go up into the main through the mouth and just slowly get dissolved. And I know that they're not true jellyfish, but like Portuguese man-of-war, who are siphonophores, they are distantly related, but they're more of a colony of animals. But their sting's powerful enough that they can catch and eat fish. So
that's just incredible. When you see those, they're just such a stunning creature, and the fact that you say they can eat fish is just phenomenal, really. I mean, some of the other things, tentacles, I'm going to say now, tendrils, yeah. Is something like the sort of longest and biggest jellyfish that's recorded is the box jellyfish, which is
the lion's mane.
Lion's mane, get it right. So so lion's mane, and that's actually something like 36 meters long. Yeah, and that's actually pretty phenomenal. And I don't, does that actually make it the largest animal on the planet? I mean, I know we think about the blue whale as we always assume in terms of volume and weight and things like that, but if it's as long as that, is it the longest animal in the planet?
Well, I believe it's the longest single animal, but then there is again a siphonophore, a colony of animals, and so they kind of clone each other, and they go along in like a big line. And again, they are a relative. They come in the same kind of group as jellyfish, which I believe I've never heard anyone say it out loud. I've only read it, but I think it's cnidarians, and the C at the beginning is silent. But they found deep sea siphonophores that are up to 80 meters long, and there was one that was discovered last year off the coast of Australia, just a giant spiral that was about 120 meters long. So technically a colony of jellyfish, but still like as one entity. And I guess like genetically it is all identical because they're all clones of each other. So yeah, really strange. I've just been noticing. I've just been noticing we've got loads of really cool questions coming in. So various things about. So I feel like Nick, you know the stuff about the anatomy. So so we've got this one, which I thought was quite thought-provoking. This is Jack saying the anus of a jellyfish is the same as a mouth.
I didn't notice I was trying to push this one onto you earlier. Yeah, it is. It is, and also, I mean, some species of jellyfish, they will also release, because you have male and female jellyfish. The male will release the sperm through the mouth as well, and some species of jellyfish, they will receive that through the females will receive that through the mouth, and the eggs will then develop into. We'll come onto this later, the planula, and then release them through the mouth. So it has many functions, this central opening. Yeah,
it's not the only animal that has that sort of function as well. I mean, we were trying to relate it to sort of like vomiting and eating. That's a little bit of our experience of sharing the same space, but it is quite fascinating, but a great question, really great. I mean, the other thing that we found out was the smallest jellyfish, and I've got a picture up here of the tiniest one, which is, Nick, have we got the notes for that?
This is it's a Japanese name, isn't it? An Iran.
Oh, we'll work it out.
You jumped that one on me.
But basically, this one is like literally 1 centimeter, and it is one of the most venomous jellyfish. And
nasty.
I think it is actually in Australia.
Irukandji.
Irukandji, there you go. So yeah, just really fascinating to see the sort of scale and different sizes of jellyfish. But going on to the anatomy, actually, the jellyfish we found, well, I've learned this again very recently, is part of a life cycle. And there is something called an immortal jellyfish as well that's been recently scientifically researched a lot. So I'm going to just show you this sort of life cycle, because the jellyfish form is only one part of a quite a long life that occurs for the jellyfish. So it starts off with this sort of, it's the polyp first, isn't it, right? Is that how it...
Maybe Russell likes to talk us through this. Russell, would you like to talk us through this? Or?
So, I mean, from what I gather, I have been down to the Marine Biological Association and done a plankton course down there as a plankton biologist myself. And we went out with a plankton net and we caught loads and loads of like jellyfish larvae, which were absolutely tiny, like maybe I'd say less than half a millimeter, something like that. And from what I gather, they can kind of overwinter. Like if conditions aren't favorable, then they can just kind of go back into this polyp state and wait for conditions to kind of go for it. And then they're like, oh, okay, conditions are nice. Okay, now, yeah, guys, let's kick in. Let's go for this. And then they kind of work their way up to the familiar kind of Medusa stage, which we are kind of more familiar with. But again, if conditions aren't great and they're like, yeah, I'm not feeling this, guys, and they just kind of like almost hibernate, I guess, and just revert back, and they can just keep doing that indefinitely.
Yeah, well, it's sort of like one thing we found out as well is that the polyp produces clones of itself. So all the jellyfish that come out of the polyp are all exactly the same, and they can continually produce. And we got a little film of a polyp releasing baby jellyfish. So we're going to just show that now. Hopefully this will work. So we were sort of saying it's a little bit like having a stack of plates. If you imagine these little babies start releasing themselves.
So what you can see is the tube there, which is the polyp. And there goes a little jellyfish. There they are.
That's amazing. That's actually so. I mean, obviously, we're about to go back into lockdown for winter. So I feel like it would be so strange if humans could just do this, just turn into a little polyp, wait for conditions to get better, and then just frisbee like clones of yourself out of your house.
That's great, and it's also sort of like, you know, like we're called INSTAR as an arts partnership. And an INSTAR, I'm sure you're very aware of, Russell, but just to explain, is sort of like that emerging of the next stage of the development of a creature, really. So if you think about, you know, the sort of caterpillar going through to the butterfly. But, you know, one thing that's sort of like a good example of similar to the jellyfish, really, is, say, the dragonfly, which actually spends majority of its life underwater as a nymph, and actually then only appears and emerges as a dragonfly for a very short period of time. But that's what we're more familiar with seeing. So when it comes to jellyfish, it's a similar story in that, you know, we're very familiar with the jellyfish, but its lifespan, it isn't that long compared to the rest of the life cycle. So it's just really, really fascinating stuff.
I think the other thing that's fascinating about that is like some jellyfish won't live that long, but once they're dead, that polyp will still be creating, quite often will still be creating clones of themselves after they're dead, which is just incredible.
Brilliant.
Yeah, well, I think what's really cool actually is kind of more and more aquariums are getting jellyfish exhibits now. And you would think, oh yeah, jellyfish exhibits, that's going to be like easy. It's going to be the sharks and the turtles that are going to require more management. But the conditions to keep the jellyfish kind of at optimal and in that Medusa state, which is obviously what they want to see, is actually really difficult. And like I've done a lot of behind the scenes tour of aquariums, and every single one says the hardest animals to keep hands down are the jellyfish, because if you don't have everything exactly right, they're just like, screw this, and they just go back to the polyp stage. So they have to use, I think it's iodine, which kind of like teases them out a little bit and kind of helps them maintain that that Medusa state. So
would it be so nice to have pet jellyfish? No, that's completely wrong, but they are really amazing. I mean, just having the images on the back of our screen here, it's just they're so amazing to watch. We've just been mesmerised as well by the sort of Monterey Bay Aquarium live jelly cam that we've been tuning into, which is just really cool as well. Which is just like, they're just really amazing creatures to observe. The other thing is that worth talking about now is actually just what jellyfish we've got around the UK coast, and there are actually 6 jellyfish. So I'm going to start putting a couple of these up, and we can talk through them really. So the first one is this beauty, which is, it's a bit pixelated, sorry, I'm not sure if you can see that very clearly, is the moon jellyfish. Did you mention that you've seen moon jellyfish, Russell?
Yeah, so moon jellyfish, I feel like those are the ones you tend to kind of, you find quite often washed up on beaches and things like that. I think my best memory of like moon jellyfish is when I trained to become a scuba diver. We used to go down to a place called Whale Island, just north of Portsmouth, which used to be a torpedo testing lake, and they've sunk things there now for help divers train. So they've sunk like a toilet and a park bench and a helicopter and a Land Rover, and people just scuba dive around. And I remember, like, when you're training to become a scuba diver, it's often not very much fun, because you just have to kind of, I mean, especially in UK waters in December, where you're just kind of like going out and having to do a lot of like, okay, I need to get my hours up, I need to show that I've done this skill. And I remember turning up to the island, and in the middle of December, and there was a layer of ice across the lake, and there was loads and loads of moon jellyfish like frozen in the top of it. And then you're like, oh, I don't want to go in. And then you go underwater, you get this like ice cream headache. You're like, oh, and you just look up and there's all the moon jellyfish stuck to the ice above you. Yeah.
Wow,
so that was
incredible, actually. I can't imagine seeing a frozen jellyfish, but that's a pretty cool story. And that's your main experience of moon jellyfish, apart from once you washed it. That's great.
yeah, that's my moon jellyfish. So yeah, there we go.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've seen them sort of. I think
I've seen them on beaches.
Yeah, I've seen them on beaches quite regular. Let's go for another one that I've not seen. I don't think I've seen, which is, oh, is that working?
Yeah.
Oh, let's do that again. There we go. Is the
Mauve
mauve
stinger. The mauve stinger.
Oh right. So do you know much about this one then, Nick? That you can
I
tell
don't.
us?
I've never seen a mauve stinger, so I'm assuming they're a little bit more rarer than the others, because I've definitely seen all of the others, but I've never come across one of these. Have you, Russell?
I've never even heard of it. It's a great name, the Mauve Stinger. It sounds like some kind of car.
It's stinger. Is it a proper stinger? Is it one of the more painful ones you can cross?
I would have thought so, yeah, with that name.
Well, that's one. So if you spot one of them, if anyone's got any information on that in the comments, please do share. This one here is the compass jellyfish. Now, we've seen compass jellyfish quite a lot, washed up actually, and they really are stunning, really look beautiful, beautiful jellyfish. Another one here is probably the biggest one, not longest, but biggest.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, more sort of.
These are the ones where you always see those amazing pictures of people scuba diving next to them, and they look like the size of a mini.
Yeah, these were very similar to those ones in Dubai, not the ones we had the fight with, but the ones that would have. They've got like those kind of quite bulbous tentacles at the bottom there, but they've also got these much finer ones you can't really see. So those are the ones which originally stung my face when I was trying to like get up close and have a look at it. So.
Well, I mean, we've seen these washed up in Scotland actually, and they're just the anatomy. Looking at them close up is just
incredible. Absolutely
beautiful, amazing creature. This next one is the blue jellyfish. It's I think quite a difficult one to identify apparently, because the blues are very variable in colour. Relatively small jellyfish as well, but again relatively common, I think, aren't they?
Yes, we've come across these in snorkeling in Cornwall a few times. Beautiful colour, those colours that you can't quite believe when you see it.
I mean, again, it's.
Go
on, Russell.
So I was going to say, because I know that the Marine Conservation Society tracks the UK jellyfish, and they've actually got like an ID guide, and they encourage people that if you do see them, then you can submit them. It's like a citizen science project, and so they're keeping track of what species of jellyfish are kind of coming up there and washing up where people have sighted them, and just to get an idea of, maybe how climate change and weather patterns is influencing their distribution and things like that. So
that's great to hear. I mean, I think sometimes you go on a beach and you're quite overwhelmed by the amount of jellyfish. It's just on one day they're all there, aren't they? But yeah, we've got a comment here, haven't we?
I kept mauve or purple jellies in an aquarium, a rare one around our coasts, but have caused massive problems. They're devastating the salmon farms on the west coast of Ireland.
Interesting.
Right,
Yeah.
Well,
I
yeah,
did not know. Thanks for that, Peter. Yeah, I didn't. I must admit, I never even thought about what do jellyfish do to fish farms. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, we go on to a little bit later in a moment. We'll talk about blooms and the impact they can have as well on certain sort of masses. And finally, our longest and largest, as we mentioned earlier, in terms of jellyfish, was the sort of lion's mane, really, which again has got these tentacles that are just so long and such a stunning jellyfish that I think when you just look at all these together, what an eclectic bunch they are. I mean, they're all quite different looking, aren't they? I mean, very, very unsimilar in many respects, and yet they all live in waters around the UK. So really, really quite beautiful. I mean, for us as artists, when I look at them, I just think, wow, they aesthetically offer so much. How on earth are we going to create a kinetic sculpture of one is still overwhelming thought, but we shall try. We shall try.
Well, yeah, no, it's yeah. Well, I guess part of it is that it's very easy to think that each jellyfish occupies the same ecological niche, and for them to do that, then they would be directly competing with each other. So I guess you would have different sizes and ones that sting and ones that don't sting, etc., because those will then feed. Not only would the size kind of dictate what conditions they can live in, but then you would also have whether they sting or not would dictate what prey they were able to kind of go for. So it would make sense, I guess, for if these 6 are all found around the coast of the UK, then they're obviously going to occupy slightly different ecological niches there.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. I mean, looking at this with the tentacles as well, you know, this is a prime opportunity for us to talk about stings, because we mentioned at the beginning, I've not had an experience to my knowledge that I've been stung by jellyfish ever, but obviously many people will associate jellyfish with being stung, and it's, you know, putting aside the fear of it, the actual science of the sting of a jellyfish is really quite fascinating stuff. And I just wondered if we could just talk a little bit about the process of that. Now, there is a diagram that we've got, and also a short film as well. So I'm just going to put this one up, because actually the science behind the jellyfish sting is pretty phenomenal. I mean, isn't it sort of like the G-force of a sting is pretty significant?
Well, there's a statistic in there that I think it's a Ferrari car that it goes from 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. So that's about 3G. 3G is about the same as what an astronaut experiences on takeoff. If you imagine like jumping in the air and jumping down, that force of you going back down again is about 3G. But the sting of a jellyfish is about 5 million G. The force that it comes out, the force that it fires.
That's unbelievable. 5 million G.
I'm looking at this drawing. It just looks like a little spring that just comes out. But actually, yeah, that force is pretty determined to sting, isn't it? And what's the name of this sting? I keep saying sting, but there is a sort of scientific term for the sting. What is it?
The nematocyst. Nematocyst.
Yeah, I can never say it and remember it, but actually it's quite distinctive. I think it'd be worth us actually having a look at the sting in action. And there is a film. Now, where's the organisation that the sting film is taken from, Nick?
They're called, we have to say thanks to Tasdru for this. They're the Tropical Australian Sting Research Unit, which sounds like a fantastic place to work, doesn't it? And this is what we're seeing here. We're seeing the nematocysts firing. You see how fast they go.
That's incredible.
I mean, it actually makes you feel like you've got your hair standing up the back of your neck, doesn't it? It's got that sort of like, But I mean, it's sort of like the sting and the sort of like...
That's just unbelievable. It's like...
Are there in a sort of space of a jellyfish? You know, like sort of, are there lots of stings on a tentacle, or are they spaced out? I don't really...
Well, there's a box jellyfish. I can't remember what species it is, but there's about... is that good? Is that right? Sorry, we don't start barking. Fireworks
going off on our street, and our dog's going to bark.
The box jellyfish has about 800,000 stings per square centimetre. 800,000. So that's incredible, isn't it?
Do you think the fireworks went off then, just because we're talking about the stings of jellyfish, and it's all kind of related, isn't it? It's firing out.
Yeah, it's like, yeah. It's like, And yeah, definitely. They obviously they're watching the live stream and we're like, yeah, let's set the fireworks off now.
Let's do it. I mean, the sting again. We've sort of just got to reiterate, haven't we, the sting fear, because I know we mentioned at the beginning of our talk and everything about our chat, just about how it can be something like a slight irritant even. I mean, a nettle sting to me, it still feels like a sharp needle at times, but actually you can feel it. But often not. A sting from jellyfish is far less than that, and we've just got to sort of relax about this fear around them because it's quite rare. And obviously, we're not living in Australia or other places where they're far more venomous, I guess. But yeah, it's
well, there's I was going to say there's over 2,000 species of jellyfish, and only 70 of them pose any kind of harm to humans.
That's
so.
Yeah, that's great to hear.
So I did the calculation. It's 3.5%. So 3.5% of jellyfish species are posed. And obviously, the only ones that you have to worry about are the box jellyfish, and that's just around the coast of Australia. So yeah, I mean, to anyone who's watching and is a bit like, the amount of times I've been stung. I think my most calamitous sting is I was snorkeling in the Med, and there was a big blue kind of jellyfish, and it had worked its way into this like underwater crevice, and it was stuck underneath it. So I went and got a stick. I found a stick on the bottom, and I went in and swam into this crevice and started trying to tease the jellyfish out. And then it stung me all over my face underwater. And I said, woo! And I kicked up off the bottom, and I cut my foot open, and then I went upwards and I hit my head on the roof of the overhang. And my girlfriend at the time found me walking along the beach. And I was just, when you cut yourself, when it's in water, it looks much worse. So I was limping with blood down my face. She's like, "What happened?" And I was like, "I tried to save a jellyfish and it stung my face."
Oh man, you're full of stories tonight. This is a good subject for you. It's great. It's great. Yeah, I mean, talking about sort of stings and everything, there is this sort of thing about to pee or not to pee, really, isn't there? It's there is this myth. We think it's a myth, or it's a story of whatever time's gone by, that if you do get stung by jellyfish, the first thing you should do is pee on it or get someone to pee on it. Obviously, in your situation, that would have been awful. But it's not the thing to do, is it? That is not what you should do. So I think the guidelines are quite different to that.
Yeah, exactly. So I think this is actually a thing that's come out of, I think it was popularized by Friends. They all go on a beach holiday, and Chandler, Monica, and Joey were walking on the beach, and Monica gets stung by the jellyfish. And then the next scene, and they all walk in, and they're all looking really shifty. And then it comes up, "They peed on me," kind of thing. But I think
what the cause of that is.
Yeah, well, I guess if you've been drinking a lot of water, and your urine is quite watered down, then I guess that it's probably a combination of the heat of it coming out of your body, plus the fact that it's maybe kind of fresh water, wash it away. The problem is if you haven't been drinking a lot of water and your urine might be, I can't remember if it's too acid or too alkali, but either way, don't wee on you. It doesn't help. The best thing to do, and that everyone recommends, is to basically just get as hot a temperature as you can stand without it burning you, and either submerge your foot or your hand, or get a towel or something and dip it in the hot water and wrap it around you for as long as you can take it. And that gradually just denatures the proteins that are inside the venom, and it feels much worse. I've been stung by weaverfish, and it's a similar thing I had to do with one of those. So I think that just hot water is
Wow.
But also it's recommended that if you have to remove any tentacles or stings that are there, use a credit card or anything to scrape them off as well. But they say there's a bit of a debate about vinegar or not. It's funny, isn't it? It's these things that they say that are good to use are often the things that you are in no way going to have with you on a beach, like a bottle of vinegar
or shaving cream,
or in this case, the NHS in Cornwall suggests shaving cream, which I know I always have handy on a beach.
Maybe people think ahead.
On these ointments that you're going to be carrying around with you, but yeah, brilliant stuff. So yeah, I think we would just need to sort of like bust the myth of stings, and I think that's a great statistic, Russell, just about the actual amount of jellyfish that do sting. Although you've got quite a good portfolio of sting stories, but I'd say that you're quite unusual on that front. So
I think it's mainly on my face, because I just see a jelly and I get too close to them. I've been stung on my face more than anywhere else.
Amazing. Yeah.
No, anyway.
Wow. So yeah, so going on really sort of like talking, we've mentioned it already actually, just about the question, I think was it from Peter, who mentioned about the salmon farms and things like that. But one of the other phenomenons that really is affiliated to jellyfish are blooms, and a bloom is really the collective name for a lot of jellyfish. And they've been known, actually, blooms to actually clog up and sort of stop production of nuclear power plants, which is just like, wow, this animal can do amazing things in terms of impact. It indicates a lot about climate change as well. So I think it's just really worth talking about blooms, because they really do inform us a lot about what's going on right now. So let's just talk about what a bloom is. I'll put a picture up first of a bloom. So a bloom is basically lots and lots of jellyfish. Is that right? But why do we get them? Who would like to?
Nick, do you want to go for this one? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I could start. It's I mean, one of the causes is it's a change in I don't know, many things really. It's things like warmer temperatures, warming seas. Jellyfish reproduce a lot better in warmer temperatures, so that can be a cause. Development in coastal areas, creating perfect surfaces for polyps to develop on. So you can have many more polyps growing in a small space if they've got surfaces like harbour walls and jetties, things like that. Also, fishing, taking away jellyfish natural predators. So it's that top-down problem. If all the predators are gone, then the jellyfish have got all the room that they want to keep going. Do
they also really survive in sort of very poor conditions? They survive very well. So sort of like, for example, when there's lots of pollutants that are going into the sea, a lot of animal life won't do very well. But jellyfish are very good at responding to those conditions and then sort of survive and multiply quite quickly.
Yeah, so things like runoff and from agriculture, the use of fertilizers, even raw sewage hitting the ocean that's high in phosphates and nitrates, can create algal blooms, eutrophication. They call it eutrophication. So losing oxygen in certain areas, creating dead zones. These are areas that jellyfish can thrive in because they're not that dependent on oxygen. Have you got anything to add about eutrophication or hypoxia, Russell?
Well, I guess, yeah, because they don't have like a normal gill like you would a fish, so they can tolerate, from what I gather, much lower oxygen concentrations, and so we are getting these massive oxygen dead zones around our oceans now. There's about 500 of them now, and they're kind of caused mainly from agricultural runoff. So it's very easy for us to kind of point the finger at farmers for saying, like, we're using too much fertilizer, but a majority of this is when you think of the number of cows that there are and the amount of slurry that these produce. So it's, this eutrophication, it goes in, the plankton, the phytoplankton that exist there are all of a sudden, nutrients. So they have these giant blooms, and then as they are growing, they use up oxygen. Then the bloom eventually dies and sinks, and then undergoes decay, which then uses up additional oxygen. So if in the absence of any predators being able to go in there and eat these jellyfish, then they're just going to be like, oh, hey guys, let's just go for it. Let's go crazy. Coupled with that, sorry? I was going to say, so the other thing is you've got warming sea temperatures, and warming sea temperatures, hot water can hold much less dissolved gases than cold water. And then you've got the whole thing about that climate change is changing our weather patterns. So some areas are becoming stormier because wind is increasing. Other places are getting warmer and kind of much calmer and more stable. And jellyfish do quite well in that. Is effectively, jellyfish are plankton. They can beat, you know, their themselves and kind of orientate themselves. But if there's a big current or a wave, they can't swim against that like a fish would be able to. So they really do well in these kind of calm, warm things. Like, is you might be familiar, like if you go on holiday somewhere warm and you swim on the surface and then you put your hand down a little bit and it's really cold. So if you can get trapped, if a jellyfish can get trapped in that top layer, then they'll do really well. And unfortunately, the strength of that hot layer is getting worse because of climate change. So
wow, let's in there. That's really interesting stuff. I mean, in terms of going back to the fact that they've sort of clogged up and stopped nuclear power plants. How did that happen? Is that because of the water flow, or the seawater's used as a coolant, isn't it? And the jellyfish have just gone in their blooms and just swam on in, and there you go, clogged everything up and caused significant problems. And I think in Japan they've come up with these sort of bubble nets to sort of deter jellyfish from doing that. But it's just quite amazing to think how overwhelming a massive jellyfish can be, and actually the causes of that. So, you know, it's great they're thriving, of course it is, but we know that the reasons there aren't so great. And so they are real indicators, and particularly if their predators aren't around so much, like the sea turtle, for example. Again, they're not being eaten as much, are they? So that there's lots of issues around that we need to be wary of and understanding of, and that's what a lot of the scientists are telling us. So jellyfish are really important indicators.
And I think one of the other things, linking it back to turtles there, is that obviously a plastic bag in the ocean does look quite similar to a jellyfish. So exactly right. So being able to make sure that you don't dump your plastic bags or use plastic bags, because no one deliberately really goes out and is like, I'm going to dump all my rubbish on the beach. But it's just like the more of it that is used, it just finds its way into the ocean. So yeah, having an awareness of that, and yeah, just knowing that jellyfish eat them, I think is really important.
Well, there's lots of other things that eat jellyfish as well.
Yeah, we've learned that recently. Actually, there's a lot of animals.
Some of the odontocetes, some of the toothed whales, they'll eat, and dolphins, they'll eat jellyfish. Sharks will sometimes eat jellyfish.
Penguins,
yeah, and even foxes have been known to eat jellyfish that have beached themselves. So again,
that plastic bag.
That is a good fact.
Yeah, foxes and jellyfish. Who would have known?
Yeah.
But yeah, so really interesting. But actually, when it comes to our artwork, we're actually thinking of creating a bloom effect as well with our artwork, seeing how we can multiply the effect of seeing the sculpture that we're doing. And we're quite interested in that multiplication of one thing. And it correlates very neatly, I think, with the whole sort of polyp and the cloning. You know, it's just quite interesting stuff. So we thought we'd just sort of like continue this short talk just to talk about our art a little bit now, if that's okay, because I think it's sort of like the science is just so fascinating, and that's why we've been drawn to jellyfish. We love the oceans. I mean, you know, we are in Nottingham, which is actually the most landlocked point of the whole of this island, which is really distressing for us because we want to be next to the sea all the time. But we are relatively a small island, so we can go both sides equally, and it takes us the same time. So we do try and find the silver lining in our location. But actually, you know, thinking about the ocean and jellyfish as our sculpture is really, really important. But also the art of movement is something that's really, really inspired us to think about this kinetic sculpture with jellyfish. And just want to sort of talk very briefly about art and science and the correlation. There's an artist, which many will know, called Ernest Heichel. And he was a scientist really who captured, I would say thousands, it probably is thousands of drawings of animals in nature, but to the finite detail. But he's very much a visual artist in the way that he presented his findings. And these are obviously very important in terms of the studies of nature. And interestingly so, for something that's jellyform, unlike when you go to the Natural History Museum and see the taxidermy of species, and they're used to help inform our understanding of wildlife, particularly in times gone by, jellyfish are jelly, and they don't keep their form, so you can't stuff a jellyfish like you can a fox, for example, to put it bluntly. But actually,
that is my favourite quote of the talk so far. You can't stuff a jellyfish like you can a fox.
Right, you can stuff a fox.
It's because you mentioned foxes before. It's the perfect example. But yeah, so basically, this here is Blashka glass. It's not the best example actually, but Blashka glass. If you go to a natural history museum anywhere, they will have their own collection. And here in Nottingham, at Nottingham's Natural History Museum, they've got a collection of jellyfish Blashka glass. And there are basically artists who create this incredible glass sculptures of jellyfish and various other jelly-like forms in the ocean. Octopus, for example, are very well known to
Portuguese
be depicted.
man of war.
Yeah, just absolutely mind-blowing stuff.
In fact, if you're interested, if you want to see some really beautiful Blashka glass, I know it's not jellyfish, but have a look on YouTube, I think, at Harvard's collection of Blashka plants and incredible specimens, all in glass. Absolutely beautiful.
And I think in times gone by, art was used to really help inform us, and we want to do the same with our art, really. So the sort of the beauty of jellyfish, the way that art and science is connected in our world, as we mentioned when we first started this chat, really is really fundamental to our practice. And particularly what's key with our project, with our sculpture, is that we're looking at kinetic sculptures, thinking about the biomechanics of the jellyfish particularly. And this is quite mind-boggling, really, that we want to create a sculpture of an animal that doesn't really have bones, but will probably have bone-like structures in the way that we create a sculpture. So it's kind of, we want to create the way that the jellyfish moves, because through our research we've discovered that jellyfish are incredibly efficient, aren't they? The way that they move in the ocean is pretty amazing.
They're the most efficient, energy efficient swimmer in the ocean. Yeah, this diagram, this animation shows it really well. When a jellyfish bell contracts, it creates low pressure around the outside of the bell and high pressure inside. So high pressure moves to low pressure, which means it gets sucked through the water. So it's like a movement through suction rather than what you would expect, like when we swim. It's like we're pushing the water away from us to create movement. But then as the jellyfish relaxes and the bell opens again, the high pressure underneath pushes the jellyfish forwards. So even in its times of relaxation, even in that relaxation moment, so it's like it's tensing its muscles, then relaxing, and as it relaxes, it's being pushed forwards. This is what makes it the most energy efficient swimmer in the ocean. I think it's calculated it's around about 30% of jellyfish travel is during relaxation.
Because there's one of my all-time, I guess, I don't know, like favorite scientists is a guy called John DeBerry, and he's just one of these really annoying people who's good at everything. He was like a professor at Caltech at age 24, and I saw him give a talk a couple of years ago at a conference I went to. And the other annoying thing is not only is he really clever and really but he's also an amazing communicator. And he's done a lot of, there he is, John DeBerry. He looks like he's being beamed up or being attacked by jellyfish, but he's unbelievable guy. Check out his research. But he's recently got a grant for $1.3 million from the US Navy, because they've realized that jellyfish propulsion is so efficient. It's 10 to 1,000 times more efficient than anything that we've been able to come up with. So the US Navy is looking to use jellyfish propulsion in their submarines and boats into the future, which would be, I can't even imagine what that would look like.
No, I was just trying to do that.
Very beautiful.
Yeah.
Maybe our kinetic sculpture will inform that research. Who knows? I mean, it's sort of like it is that movement that really is quite amazing. But also going back to that subject about the importance of caring for our oceans and our planet. The fact that they are incredibly efficient means that we're thinking about, can we use wind to create our sculpture? And we have some kinetic inspiration around that idea. So first we're going to just show you a film, a very little clip of an artist called
Theo Jansen. I think Theo Jansen.
Yeah,
Dutch artist.
And he creates these strand beasts. And this is just one example of one of his strand beasts, just to give you an idea of what it's like. He's got loads of them. Look him up online. He's absolutely amazing.
in the bottle. So when they get to water, they'll stop, and it'll pick up the change in pressure, and they'll turn around and walk back again.
So we're going to do a live
That's incredible.
demonstration of
We
this.
have our own strand beast here. Whether you can see that.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so this is going to be live demonstration with a hairdryer and a sculpture. So watch this.
Start them again.
That is so cool.
Oh.
What's great is that you can change the pressure of the air to how fast it moves. So it's really amazing. You get these.
I always think it looks a bit like a crab. It's very crab-like movement. Very crab-like, but it does have a character to it.
And so we want our sculptures to just have a character, to be a spirit. You know, a lot of sculpture you will find is quite solid. It's positioned. A lot of the work we've done is there, and you can arrange your eye to appreciate in different form in different ways. But to create something that's got a bit of a different life to it is really, really exciting for us. So we've got another example of a studio called Studio Drift, and that's the name of our dog as well, so we particularly like them. But they've done these great sculptures that are actually about how a flower opens. But there's lots of films of this that you can go and see. If you look on YouTube, you'll find. So yeah, they're multi-million-pound projects, and ours is quite not ilk. But you know, we'll get some cardboard and various other things to see how we get on, maybe some paper. But really, that's the sort of inspiration, really, is to think about the movement. And through the Festival of Science and Curiosity, which is happening in February, and it's the 10th, I think, of February, it's on for a week, is that it's really about stimulating that curiosity. And I know, Russell, you mentioned that with Incredible Oceans, really. It's about finding routes to understanding this, in this case, you know, biomechanics. It's also thinking about sort of the standard engineering and mechanics, but also about movement and movement of animals in oceans, all sorts of really interesting stuff. And the fact, like you say, that they're super efficient in the ocean. And we might see jellyfish as being kind of, you know, a bit clumsy with their swimming, when actually there's a little bit more to it than what we first thought. So we want to try and convey that in a beautiful way. So yeah, that's the sort of inspiration for our piece.
But also trying to mirror the energy efficiency as well, you know, the wind power or the solar power with the efficiency of the jellyfish.
Yeah, so watch this space. That's happening over the next month, really.
It's really exciting. So the sculpture is going to have to be ready by it's February, the festival.
Yeah, it's the 10th
is that
to
correct?
17th. Yeah, 10th to 17th, and because of the current pandemic we've got at the moment, there's going to be a lot of stuff online as well. So we'll see how it's going to be presented. We're looking at all options, really. And yeah, it's just going to be really challenging for us. I mean, what really attracted us to the brief was that there was an invitation for artists to really expand on their practice, so to learn and be involved in the science as much as anything else. So this is really quite ambitious for us, but really exciting at the same time. And to have like a connection like today, to meet with you guys and to talk about jellyfish, this is new to us, and it's really, really great. And hopefully we'll network and keep the collaboration going and learn as much as we can. So anyone out there who's listening wants to sort of offer some advice and thoughts on our approaches, we'd really welcome you to get in touch, really. But yeah. So that's where we're at with our work, really. So we're sort of coming to sort of like the end of our conversations at the moment. There was just a couple of other facts just to sort of say that we wanted to throw in, and one of them is that jellyfish have been in space.
Yes, they have already been in space. We were just thinking about what's the future of jellyfish. Where do we go with this? You know, but you know, it seems like a Hollywood movie kind of situation, really, with jellyfish. They've been into space. They seem to have done everything. They've plugged nuclear power stations. They've, you know, so I think it's not
what's left.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's sort of like, yeah, there's sort of, you know, the fact that it actually, again, you know, space exploration is a science, of course, but actually, you know, just looking at the science of this beautiful animal actually in its own habitat is what we're really, really keen to really understand more of. And just, you know, just understanding that when they went up into space and they came back and they had a bit of a struggle with gravity is just really interesting in itself. You know, they struggled to re-acclimatise back after being up there. There's
also been some positive science recently on jellyfish and carbon sequestration, you know, the holding of carbon with jellyfish. Do you know anything about this, Russ?
Yeah, well, basically, I think from what I gather, that people may be familiar with a thing called a whale fall, which does what it says on the tin. When a whale dies and sinks down into the deep ocean, and as it dies, it takes with it obviously the elements that it was made of from the surface ocean into the deep ocean, where those nutrients get recycled and a certain amount of it will end up as sediment again. But there was a study that came out last week that was talking about the significance of jelly falls. So when these blooms of jellyfish happen and then the jellyfish die and sink, that they're taking their carbon and their elements that locked it up in them down into the deep ocean. And scientists have actually done the calculation to find out that jellyfish are responsible for getting as much carbon out of the atmosphere as the whole of the US produces in a year, which I believe is something like 6.8 billion tons of carbon, which is pretty incredible. So, yeah. So good work, really jellyfish.
Yeah, rock on, absolutely amazing. And I think, yeah, sort of the importance of looking after this creature and actually the part they play in what we're all challenged with right now is so important, you know. And I think it's sort of like keeping ourselves connected to the oceans particularly. And we always say, don't we, like when we think about the oceans, a lot of the time it's hidden, you know. A lot of people don't actually realise the importance of our oceans as much as perhaps things on land because it's not so visible to us. But actually they play a very, very important part. And we sort of want to sort of end really our sort of conversation today on that positive note that actually jellyfish are doing a lot, and
they're doing a good job.
They're doing a great job, and we love them. And and sort of say that we look forward to finding out more about them as we progress with our plans, really,
and help other people to learn more about them.
Yeah,
you know.
Well, on that subject, we have actually got 2 questions that have come in, and I'll be honest, I don't have a clue. So, so these are over to you guys, and these are things I've not really thought about, if I'm honest. And this is one of the things I absolutely love doing videos and doing public engagement and speaking to people, because it's kids especially ask these questions where you're like, whoa, I never even thought of that. So first question, we're going to go in age order. So first question comes from Noah, age 6, and he asks, do jellyfish have eyes, and can they see?
Ooh.
Yeah, well, not all, but there's
some. There's a box jellyfish. I can't remember the species, but there is a box jellyfish that has 24 eyes, and they're all different types of eyes. They take on different forms for different things. You know, there's much like we have. I don't know whether you know. We call them dooley bugs that you see skating around on the surface of ponds. And they have eyes that are split in the middle so they can see below the surface and above the surface. And these particular box jellyfish are predatory jellyfish. There's 2 different types of shape of jellyfish. One's prolate, which is like a bullet shape, and the other is oblate, which is the more familiar bell shape. The prolate, bullet-shaped jellyfish are stealth hunters, they're stealth predators. And these ones in particular hang around in mangroves, and they use their eyes to navigate mangrove swamps. So they look up and they see, the trees in the mangroves and the root systems in the mangroves, and they use their eyes to navigate through those tree systems.
There you go.
So yeah,
Wow.
4 eyes in one.
There we go.
I mean,
That's really cool.
how do they know what they're seeing if they haven't got a brain?
Yes.
So we haven't got to that point yet of working that one out. But they have got 24 eyes.
That's pretty cool. Well, I guess they must work a bit like an octopus and not have a central nervous system like we're used to thinking of an organism, but actually, if you like, their consciousness is distributed throughout their entire body. So there we go. So we're also and this is another thing which I guess I'd never really thought about. I guess kind of assumed that jellyfish laid eggs and things like that, and we touched upon this with the immortal jellyfish. But Timothy, age 8, would like to know how jellyfish reproduce.
Ooh.
We get the pic. There is
there is. Apart from the life, what's the life? Well, that's the immortal jellyfish.
That's the immortal.
Well, that's all right though. I mean, the reproduction of jellyfish. Well, we went through the sperm and the egg into the planula, into the polyp, or the polyp releasing. But there's another jellyfish.
So can I just quickly ask? So in terms of this whole sperm and egg thing, that I'm guessing happens externally, and that when conditions are right, the female will release her eggs, the male will release the sperm, much in the same way that corals do, I guess. Because I know that corals are distant relatives of jellyfish. I'm assuming a similar thing happens.
Yes, the same thing. I think it depends on species again. So some will, the females will take sperm in internally. Some will just swim through and release eggs.
And then this fertilized egg goes round into this sort of larva and then forms the polyp.
Into the polyp, yeah. As well, the picture that we've got up at the moment talks about is basically about the immortal jellyfish, which if the jellyfish gets injured at all, it can shrink in size. It's what's the best way of putting it? It almost starts digesting itself in a kind of way, goes back to the polyp form, and then starts cloning itself all over again. So in a way, it never dies. It carries on going. It has the ability to keep going and going. And I don't think anybody really knows what the oldest immortal jellyfish is. I mean, how would you track one? I have no idea.
Cool. Oh, fascinating. Awesome. Right. So just before we go, because obviously we've done like a bit of an science art overlap, we actually work with an artist at times called Scott Masson, who's based in Bristol, and he does a lot of illustrations with ink. And I've just put a little comment there at the bottom, but he is doing a 20% off his jellyfish prints during World Ocean Day. So if you go to his Etsy, not World Ocean Day, World Jellyfish Day. So if you go to his Etsy, which I'll put up at the bottom, and you can type that code in, there we go, then you get 20% off his jellyfish things. He's got t-shirts and he's got mugs as well. So I think those are pretty good. What, sorry?
Are they ink?
Yeah, so he does them freehand using Indian ink, and then he scans them in to the computer, and that's how he does the colouring on them. So I'm guessing that these ones have been inverted. So
that's
really
great to
nice,
see. I
really
mean,
nice.
yeah, I mean to even begin to draw jellyfish in that detail is just pretty phenomenal, really.
Well, how do you get them to stay still?
Very good, very good. So, come on, draw me like one of your French girls. Yeah.
It's my best.
Brilliant. Well, I mean, on our side of things, in terms of rounding up as well, I guess, just to say, look out for the festival. Really, it's run by an organisation called Ignite Futures, which is all about engaging lots and lots of people from various ages and communities in science, and they do loads of natural sciences with that. And our artwork is called SubUmbrellar. That's what we're calling our artwork, and obviously we talked about under the SubUmbrellar today. But so it's of Ignite, and it's the Festival of Science Curiosity. Go online and get all the information, and there'll be a program up there, and check it out, and come see our work virtually, even if you can't head over to Nottingham.
Yeah, Fantastic. Well, yeah, guys, thanks ever so much. It's been great chatting to you, and I'm really excited to see how the sculpture progresses, because I mean, I'm thinking I have no idea how you're going to make. I mean, you can understand something like a crab with the joints, but jellyfish have a joint, and so I'm like, yeah, like you said, this is going to be really interesting to see. To see what you guys come up with.
Creative interpretation is what it's called. It's interpretation of something. It will be a creative expression.
Cool.
But we're really excited about it. That's good. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Well, everyone who's been watching, thank you ever so much for tuning in. Hope you've learned lots of stuff. I know that we definitely have. So yeah, we're just going to keep a lookout. Obviously, lockdown is happening, so Incredible Oceans are going to start probably doing a few more live streams. So let everyone know about these, and and hopefully we'll have Trish and Nick back on. Closer to the time when they've got the jellyfish sculpture.
Yeah, that'd be amazing.
Cool.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Cheers, guys. Thanks ever so much.
Thanks to everyone. Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye.
Incredible ocean, magical place to be. So much that we can learn from life in the deep blue sea. Incredible ocean, magical place to be. So much that we can learn from life in the deep blue sea.